call the Bremen High School District 228 Board of Education meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Canning? Mrs. Gleason here. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Jones? Here. Mrs. Camworth? Mrs. Ressler? Here. Mrs. Stearns?
Here, please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this moment, I'm looking for approval of the May 9th, 2017 regular and closed session minutes. Second. Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Jones. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Ressler? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye. Do we have any comments from the public?
I have one from David Newman. How can I assist in making government a mandatory non-excusable class? How can I help introduce an entrepreneurship class or seminar to the curriculum?
So to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Dave Newman. I'm the president of the Oak Forest High School Alumni Association. Another title that I'm also is that the city clerk of the city of Oak Forest. Something that is really important to me is government, especially for young men and women, especially in these political times nationally as well as locally. I think it's very important that we have it. I had the privilege of being taught at this high school by Mr. McDonough, and he taught a really good government class. But during my time, it was possible for students to skip the class through an economics summer school. I feel that that students at this time, unfortunately, are ill prepared for understanding how government works, and that we could possibly do better as a district to encourage them to be more active and learn a bit more about what's going on in maybe a non-excusable fashion or maybe a full semester requirement. I was hoping to see, I'll admit that I'm a little bit ignorant about the legislative session of how this body works and how we might go about the process of it, not in the 2017-2018 school year, but maybe the 2018-2019 school year, introducing something to maybe move towards something like that. Secondly, with the digital revolution and everything that's going on right now, there's a lot of excellent stories about young men and women who are able to skip the college process, not because that they don't need to learn, but because they're also doing well in the entrepreneurship field. There's a young man, I believe I read about in Orland, who has his own business that makes $1 million and he's just about 19. It was the most amazing story that I'd ever heard. I would like to hear about those success stories out of this district as well. Now, that one might not be a class, it could be a seminar, it could be both as an elective, not a requirement. But in general, what would be the best way for us to go about, or maybe I could assist in helping this body move forward in one or both of those classes?
So is it like a political science type class?
Yeah.
Like what's it, yeah.
Yeah, just a government class. We have it's a half a year one that I'm aware of at the moment that happens within the district. It's mandatory with a half year of economics.
As far as, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I was actually leaning towards Dr. Williams to speak on that.
as far as the entrepreneurship part, we do have a new program that you might not be aware of, a career practicum, where they have different ways that they could research a career, take a college course, intern with someone,
nice.
research it,
Oh, that's fantastic.
and we are looking for members of the community to reach out to us so we can, sign up kids.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, excellent.
So I'll address the entrepreneurship and the government too. We also offer entrepreneurship as a semester course.
Oh, good. Okay,
And
cool.
so
I
it
didn't know.
depended upon the building and depended upon the student interest.
Okay.
We usually run 2 sections district-wide every other year, depending upon the building. As far as the government goes, I understand, the concern there, but under the new ESSA law, America Every Student Succeeds Act, they have added a civics component. So for us, we've actually embedded civics into government. So starting with the current sophomores, that is their new graduation requirement
Oh, good.
instead of
Okay.
econ. Yes. So econ is being replaced by personal finance,
Okay.
and then all students are going to be required to take government, which has the new civics requirement.
Oh, fantastic. And it's not a skippable by doing economics or anything
Now
like
they can
that?
do it in summer school. That'll be
Oh,
offered
it's still a government
eventually, but
summer
they
school.
still have to take.
Oh,
it.
yeah, that's not a big deal. I just want to make sure that they're being well prepared and hoping to put us over the top of other districts.
Yes.
Well, it's fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll move on to our superintendent's report.
Since our last regular board meeting, we received the following information of act requests. Hiring and of Local Labs Media Services requested all emails sent and or received over school district officials' email accounts pertaining to an incident at the April 18th board meeting. This request has been completed. Tatiana Walk-Morris, a Chicago freelance journalist, requested the complete file of former employee Ryan Dolan. This request has been completed. Marcus Martinez of Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law requested student discipline information for the years 2015-16 and 2016-17 and the discipline policies and handbooks. This request has been completed. Despite one of the wettest springs in history, I'm happy to announce that phase 1 of our construction of our artificial turf fields is progressing on schedule. Installation has begun at Oak Forest High School with the placement of the rock shock pad and the artificial turf. After the field is in place, the installation of numbers, letters, and logos will begin. Tennis courts work will begin at Oak Forest in the next few weeks. Also, the storm tech installation is now complete at Hillcrest High School, and the rerouting of electrical lines with ComEd should be finalized at the end of the week. Installation of artificial turf fields will begin at Hillcrest and Bremen High Schools in the weeks ahead. Tinley Park High School will be the final school to receive artificial turf. We are currently completing site utility work within the football field and will begin placing stone at the end of this week. On this evening's agenda, you will see the resignations of our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Mr. Tom O'Malley, and our District Information Technology Manager, Mr. Jim Donato. Tom has worked with us for 26 years. Over that time, he has held the position of business teacher at Hillcrest High School, assistant principal for student services at Bremen High School, district facilities manager, and assistant superintendent for financial services. Tom has accepted the superintendent position at Evergreen Park High School, District 231. Jim Donato is a Bremen graduate who has worked with us for 15 years. He has held the positions of network analyst, district informational technology manager. Jim has accepted the position of district or director of network operations at Evergreen Park High School, District 231. I'd like to publicly thank both of these gentlemen for their years of service, loyal service to the students of Bremen High School. Congratulations and all the best.
I'd just like to address the board and go on record to talk to the board and my colleagues. It's a little bittersweet as I submit and the board approves my resignation. I spent 26 wonderful years of my career here in this great district. I'd like to thank all the board for your time and your effort and your dedication to the students and staff in our community. You do a job that goes unpaid and unheralded, and your commitment is the reason that we have had the success that we have. A special thanks to Mrs. Evelyn Gleason, who has been on our board for 20 plus years. She has been nothing but an advocate for students and staff in this district, and I thank you, Mrs. Gleason. I'd also like to thank Dr. Kendall. It's been an honor to work with him for the last 10 years. I can get through this. He's done an exceptional job of moving this district forward. His leadership and vision has really changed the dynamics of the district over the last 10 years and made this a much better place for our students and our staff. I'd also like to thank my wonderful colleagues and staff, so many that I can't mention them all tonight, but it's been a wonderful experience working with all of you, and I will always treasure my memories that I have here in the district. I'm very excited for the district because as we look into the future, we positioned ourselves to be doing some great things with our students, with our staff, with our facilities over the next several years. And I'm excited to come back and see the wonderful progress that's going to continue throughout the district. And again, my heartfelt, sincerest thank you to everyone.
Thank you, we appreciate it. I'm sure there are relationships not over. Good luck.
Thank you.
Do any board members have anything?
I just want to say you will be dearly missed. I don't know I don't know all of the extent of the work, but I know that you have worked hard to make sure that. We don't. The true extent that you have worked to get this district on track, it was wonderful working with you to make sure that we stay intact and keep on budget. Superseded some of our expectations. Just thank you, and you really, really will be missed.
Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to announce about the State Bill 1, that is purpose to fairly fund education has been passed by legislation, and I want to just publicly thank our state representative, Will Davis, that has worked really hard to ensure that education is funded. We've had a lot of things with funding as a state to try to get funding fairly distributed amongst the state. And so I look forward to, I know this, they're scheduled to meet tomorrow and have more discussions about trying to fund education. And just wanted to make mention of that as well. So.
I just want to thank Mr. Tom O'Malley for what he has done for our district. He took our district from about 12 million in debt down to under 4, so about 3.5. When I ran at 15, it was about 6. And he managed to whittle it down. We need to congratulate the people that really worked hard to help our district make it. And he's the reason why we have the $50 million bond, and along with Dr. Kendall and the staff. So yes, I want to personally thank you for what you've done, because you've always been a constant professional to me, even though it may not always seem like it. But I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you.
So, 2 years ago, I knew nothing about school finance. Nothing. And I was finance chair. And I was petrified as to how I was going to perform my role in the best capacity as possible for the school district. And one of the first meetings I had was with Mr. O'Malley. And the first impressions I had was I never met anyone more passionate about finance or math as I did, and he made me want to learn more about what to do with school finances. He made me want to just be the best chairman that I could be, and make sure that I was informed. And I just, in the research that I had done as to where the school district had been, I was really astonished as to the work that he's done for the school district. And by no means, I know a day will not go by that I don't thank you, for everything you've done for the district, and the opportunities that you provided for students today and in the future. You've been, I think I echo Mark, is just completely professional with all of us. And you've been a great friend. So I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Me too. To add to the comments, when I first got on the board, finance was the one committee I didn't want to be a part of, but somehow I ended on it, and when Tom came along as the chair, things really began to change. You'll even see on tonight's agenda, there's so many contract renewals with 0 increases. I mean, that's practically unheard of in the business world. And that doesn't just happen. It happens because of the work of Tom and the other administrators who just keep talking until they get what they want. And it's worked. I mean, we've gone from every secretary in every building ordering whatever supply they wanted from anywhere to a joint contract at Staples. And we could go on and on with all the examples. As a taxpayer, I'm eternally grateful to you, because not only are you serving the district, but you're serving each of us who live here. And Evergreen is a lucky place to have you, and I know you're going to do a bang-up job there, Superintendent. So we'll be in touch when we see what's going on there. I'd also like to say a thank you to Jim Donato, even though he's not here. Jim came along. Boy, we had network analysts who had absolutely no training whatsoever, and they were in charge of everything. And here he comes with a college degree in network, and he's another one who he can take something that someone wants to sell us for $100,000, and he finds it for $295 on the internet, and he's unbelievable. So, I mean, I know one of the graduates from Bremen thanked him. He's taught this kid more in a summer than he's probably going to learn in 4 years of college. But, so Evergreen is also lucky to have him, and hopefully you're not taking anybody else with you.
I also, I already spoke regarding the town, but I'd like to thank Mr. Pazek here. He came with a group of girls and performed at Oak Forest Memorial Day celebration, and the crowd just did not have words to express what they thought of this group of young ladies. They were truly outstanding, and it was so appreciated how they came out on holiday morning to share their gifts with the community. It was very nice. And we'll move on to committee reports. It's finance.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Finance Committee met on Monday, June 12th. In attendance were myself, Mrs. Ressler, Mr. O'Malley. Mrs. Jones was on vacation, was unable to join us. There was no old business or under new business. The committee reviewed and discussed the June bills, the impressed expenditures and deposits. Along with the superintendent, the Finance Committee is recommending these for full board approval. There were no over 5,000 purchase orders. We reviewed and approved with the superintendent's recommendation the CDS bills for June totaling $123,510.83. We also reviewed the fall athletic equipment and supply bids. As usual, these bids were cherry-picked from a variety of vendors, and the Finance Committee and the superintendent are recommending the approval of all the low bids totaling $44,633.01. We also reviewed the property casualty renewal. NISRO is waiting to receive a final quote from carriers that were interested in providing proposals. Final renewal proposal will be provided in the board packet. Right now we're at 12% and waiting for one other insurer to come to weigh in. Health and dental renewal, again, some outstanding rates. We reviewed the renewal updates, the HMO renewal rate 5.5%, which is below market trends. The PPO renewal rate of 5.8, again, below market trends. And the Finance Committee and the superintendent recommending these for full board approval. We also reviewed an extermination contract with Smithereen Pest Management Services. They agreed to hold the current pricing for the upcoming year. Superintendent and the Finance Committee recommend this for full board approval. We reviewed the disposal contract from Homewood Disposal. They have proposed a 4.5% increase for the upcoming year. This is favorable based on the fact that the overall monthly cost will go down due to revised services for Tinley Park High School. And the superintendent and the Finance Committee recommend the disposal contract for approval. We also discussed the upgrades to technology slated for the summer. The computer upgrade is part of our annual rotation. We will replace 360 computers for a total of $122,000. The new content filter will be more robust and will remain compliant with the Children Internet Protection Act. That contract is for $17,000. Site-to-site connections will provide upgrade of 1 gig connections to increase the internet speed, which is a cost savings per month. And the phone system cutover will take place, upgrading the type of phone connection That's a $3,000 upgrade. Finance Committee and the Superintendent recommend all these technology upgrades for full board approval. Finance Committee discussed the capital item of the gym flooring abatement at Oak Forest High School. Universal asbestos removal was the low bidder at $60,000. Finance Committee and the Superintendent recommending the approval of the gym floor abatement at Oak Forest for full board approval. Gym flooring at Bremen, Tinley, and Oak Forest. Finance Committee reviewed and discussed these capital items for the gym flooring work scheduled for this summer at the 3 schools. The Floors Incorporated was the low bidder at $451,800. Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, are recommending these for low bids for these projects. I'd also like to point out, I know the floor at Bremen is the original, and the building is over 50 years old. So. 60, excuse me. Gee, younger than me. Finance Committee discussed the ball field project for Bremen High School. There was only one bid, and the pricing did not fall within the projected budget range. So along with the Superintendent, the Finance Committee is recommending that this bid be rejected. Finance Committee also discussed the bid for the tracks at all 4 high schools. The base bid for the work was $276,179. The alternate bid to resurface the 4 tracks is $205,103. The district will then receive a change order credit of $116,282 due to the modified scope regarding the curb detail as a result of Mr. Masterson. Thank you, Mr. Masterson, for your efforts there. That's $116,000 savings. The Finance Committee and the Superintendent will be recommending the low bid and the alternates submitted by Midwest Track Builders. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 10th at 7 p.m. at the Ed Center. Meeting adjourned at 7:38.
Thank you. Now, personnel, Ms. Russell.
Personnel met on Monday, June 12th at 6:30 p.m. Present were myself, Mrs. Camworth, Mrs. Stearns, and Dr. Goggins. For new business, Dr. Goggins presented the following certificated staff recommendations for discussion. Bremen, the approval of the medical leave request for a special education teacher and the maternity leave request for a physical education teacher. The approval of the employment of a Spanish teacher and a science teacher. At Tinley Park, the approval of the maternity leave request for a physical education teacher and the retirement request of a physical education teacher. The approval of the employment of a science teacher, a speech pathologist, and a Spanish teacher. Hillcrest, the approval of the retirement request of a science teacher and the acceptance of the resignation of a business teacher. The approval of the employment of a dean of students, a social science teacher, a school psychologist intern, a social worker, and a 50% counselor. Oak Forest, the approval of the employment of a library information specialist. For the district, the approval of the maternity leave request for the Director of Special Education and the exploratory career leave request for the physical education supervisor. The approval of the employment of an assistant superintendent for finance services. After review of the certificated staff items, the committee agreed to make a recommendation to the full board for approval. Dr. Goggins presented the following educational support personnel recommendations for discussion. Bremen, the approval of a retirement request for the IMC secretary, the approval of the employment of a third shift lead custodian and a Spanish translator interpreter, the change in position of a custodian from third to second shift, and an IMCA to IMC secretary. At Tinley Park, there were none. Hillcrest, there were none. Oak Forest, the approval of the employment of a part-time weekend custodian and the building manager/chief. There were no additional discussions, no announcements. The next meeting is scheduled for July 10th at 6:30 p.m. at the Administration Center, and the meeting was adjourned at 6:53 p.m.
For the last time, new business, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Stearns. Board members, item 8.1 pertains to our monthly bills, the addendums to bills, payroll, and CDS bills. Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, are recommending these to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Ressler. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason, aye. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
I do have a quick question. How will the new turf hold up to, I'm sorry, how will the, just repay, or, how do you say that? The structure of the track.
Resurfacing.
Resurfacing, hold up to. Okay, gotcha.
So we'll get there when we get there.
Okay. Item 8.2 pertains to the PTAB for CV Chicago Partners. This is being recommended by our district attorney to complete the sharing of this appeal with District 142. The superintendent is recommending this to the board this evening.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Gleason. Any discussion?
We shared it with 144 though. Not 144.
I think I have it down.
You have that, Ms. Reed.
We forgive you.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.3 is the annual prevailing wage act. The superintendent is recommending approval of this prevailing wage act as required.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gleason, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.4 is our fall athletic equipment and supplies bids. As Mrs. Gleason said, the total of these bids are $44,633. These items are being recommended to the board this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Russell, second by Ms. Gleason. When is the cross going to be? Is that fall?
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.5 pertains to our property casualty insurance renewal. The superintendent and the committee are recommending this renewal.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Russell, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion?
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.6 pertains to our health and dental insurance renewal with Blue Cross Blue Shield. As Mrs. Gleason revealed, the renewal rates are very favorable. We're recommending this renewal to the board this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Russell, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.7 pertains to the extermination contract renewal with Smithereen. This is also being recommended to the board this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Russell. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.8 pertains to the disposal contract renewal with Homewood Disposal. They've been providing our service for a number of years and have provided us a solid service. The Finance Committee and the Superintendent are recommending those renewals to the board.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Jones, second by Ms. Russell. Any discussion? What's the changes to Tinley?
We're eliminating an 8-yard dumpster there that was not necessary. So that's going to reduce the monthly costs and lower the overall monthly for everyone as a result.
They had more 8-yarders than the others. Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.9 pertains to the technology upgrades that Mrs. Gleason reviewed in the summary notes. We're recommending these to the board this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Russell. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.10 pertains to the gym flooring abatement at Oak Forest. The recommendation is the low bid of $60,000 from Universal Asbestos Removal.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gleason, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mrs. Gleason, aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye.
Item 8.11 is the recommendation for the gym flooring at Bremen, Tinley Park, and Oak Forest. The low bid of $451,800 is what is being recommended from Floors Incorporated.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Wrestler. Any discussion?
Tom, remind us why Hillcrest isn't one of these. I know you told us and I don't remember.
Yeah, the Hillcrest initially, the reason for the three was Oak Forest had abatement that needed to take place, and their floor was in severe need of repair. The floor kept lifting and popping. And what happened at Oak Forest, or excuse me, at Bremen at Tinley Park, those gyms were constructed during the same era, and there's a ventilation shaft that runs the length of the floor, and the material used to construct over that shaft has weakened over the years and created a number of dead spots and some hazards. So those floors were all going to be redone. Hillcrest had been done recently, but after looking at the overall numbers and reviewing things, we were able to factor in Hillcrest as well into and still fit it in within the budget. That way all four schools are going to get their floors done for the start of the upcoming school year.
This was something that really needed to be done. Tinley and Oak Forest especially was just dangerous,
Yes, absolutely.
If
scary.
anybody's been in Oak Forest Gym, instead of having a plank that was like 3 feet long, they had planks that were like 6 inches long. And I mean, you can walk across the floor and it wiggles. So that's, glad to see that getting done.
So you said that it had recently been done, but we could still, if we put it in the bid, it'll make a sweeter deal for all of it, or what?
Which one are you referring to, Ms.
For Hillcrest.
For Hillcrest, yeah. Hillcrest has had some issues. Their floor was okay. We could have gotten by another year, but we thought it was appropriate, being that we were under budget for what we had proposed for the three, if we could work in Hillcrest within that budget as well and get all four schools done at the same time. We thought that would work within the budget and also be fair so that somebody wasn't being left out in this situation.
But they're just not in this bid.
Their repairs are extensive.
Right. The bid is only for the initial three. It was determined afterwards that we could work Hillcrest in. So that is something the board will be approving next month, the bid for Hillcrest floor.
And when does
Someday be bringing that forward.
Not funny.
Too soon, too soon.
When did you say that that construction for all of the four buildings starts, and when will it be completed by?
It's already started for the three of them, and they'll all be completed by August. Before the start of the school year, yes. So none of our classes or students will be displaced for the start of the upcoming school year.
Constant profession. Worked all the way to the end.
You're here. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye.
Item 8.12 pertains to the ball field at Bremen High School. Again, only receiving one bid. The recommendation, and it was over budget, is to not approve this bid this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gleason, second by Mr. Johnson. Let's start discussion. What is special, or why do you think we didn't get only one?
I think the timing of when the bid was let, there was only one vendor that bid it, and they're typically high. And then after some further conversation the architects have had with contractors, they felt it would be to our advantage to reject this bid, rebid it, and we'll still get it done within the time frame that we need to, but they'll have other bidders at that time that'll be looking to submit bids.
Mrs. Gleason, aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye.
Item 8.13 is for the track bid. The recommendation is to accept the base bid and the alternate from Midwest Track.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Gleason. Okay, now Leslie, you want to know what changes?
Okay, yes. I wanted to know, based on this new resurfacing, how would that affect as far as, really, I guess, the new field that we'll be receiving? Will that cause erosion, or are we looking for some repairs down the line of the turf? Or is it, the resurfacing just as good as?
No, it's not going to impact the new fields whatsoever. There's not going to be any erosion. In fact, the detail that Mr. Masterson worked out with the architects is going to provide a seamless transition between the track as well as the turf. There's not going to be any trip hazards. It's all going to be the same height. And there's drainage, ample drainage provided in the new turf field. So there's not going to be any water issues or anything like that. It was particularly an issue at Hillcrest because if you've been on the field, which many of you have, there was about a 10-inch variance between the track and the actual playing surface, and that's going to be eliminated now moving forward with the new detail and with the new field coming in. So it'll be one flat surface now, and the transition will not be hazardous for our athletes as they participate, whether it be in football and or track.
So it'll be basically the same, it won't be. it'll be
Right, there'll be no
level, or-
height differential between the track and the field.
Okay, because I know it's a big
Moving
slope, it just.
Right.
Terry thought of this.
But Terry had worked out a construction design with the architects to eliminate a lot of the hand troweling work that was going to be necessary with the original detail. And now they can use their equipment and do their full rollout of the track without having to go back and hand trowel this, which is where all the labor costs come in.
Well, you can stop and take a bow, sir. You certainly have earned your money. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason, aye. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Stern?
Aye. Dr. Williams?
Thank you. Item 8.14 is our district Title I plan. While the board has always approved our Title I plans, this is a new process for all school districts this year. It's a new application process, and it's the first step. We actually have to get it submitted and approved by ISB before we can even file a Title I grant or a Title II grant. This plan was developed from feedback from all of our buildings, our parents, our students, and our staff. And based on all that feedback, we've identified 3 overarching goals. First, to remind everyone, Title I is all about enhancing the performance of our low-income, lowest performing students. Okay, so our goal is to reduce the achievement gap between our subgroups. To do that, I'm just going to quickly highlight some of the things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at potentially hiring a reading specialist, because we know we have a pocket of students that need some more intensive reading remediation. While we want to maintain focus on discipline literacy in all of our content areas, we know that most of our classroom teachers are not trained in how to assist students in developing specific reading skills. So this reading specialist, much like we have with our instructional technology specialists, to do some pull-outs with students to remediate, but also to provide professional development to our staff. We would like to support our math teachers this year with professional development as we lead into the implementation of integrated math beginning with the 2018-19 school year. We want to continue to not only infuse SAT-type activities within all of our content areas, we want to continue to provide SAT prep programs for our students. This year, based upon our data between our fall test and our spring test, students that went through a test prep program actually increased their scores anywhere from 10 to 25 points. And we're looking for a 20-point growth between those 2 tests. So we want to continue to roll it out and get more students involved. The grant was able to pay for all of our low-income students to participate in SAT prep programs with outside funding. So that was very helpful. We want to continue to provide academic supports through all of our tutoring services, also providing bilingual tutors, expand our credit recovery opportunities, and we'd also like to do some program evaluations, taking a look at some of our existing courses and seeing if maybe we can redefine how we're approaching some of our courses and reallocate funding. Our second goal is to increase health and social and emotional well-being of our students. We were finding that this is an area of focus that we want to have for this school year. We have about 1% of our population is homeless, so that's district-wide, so we have upwards of 70 students a year that are homeless, so the grant allows us to provide transportation for those students. We also buy school supplies. We're going to continue to expand not only for our homeless students, but our low-income students, medical, dental, and vision services. This year, we were able to contract with Walgreens to provide meningococcal immunizations, and that's the main one that our seniors, if they don't get it by October 15th, they're out of school. We actually started that this spring with our juniors, and we got probably about half of them immunized, so now that they're going to be in school. And we'll be able to have vouchers then for the remaining students in the fall to make sure that they have that shot. We are able to provide dental services and buy glasses for some of our low-income students. We want to continue to do that as well. Another thing we want to look into is work with Sodexo and provide breakfast vouchers for our low-income students so that they can start the day off with a good meal for free. We'd like to continue to provide pull-out services for students needing social and emotional support, utilizing our social workers and our psychologists and also our interns to provide some more small group intensive support. We'd like to provide tuition coverage for at-risk students to attend Snowball. That's something new that we want to see if we can get more of our at-risk students involved in that program. And continue to provide PD to our staff about how to support students with social and emotional needs. Our final goal is to continue to increase parental involvement. Our schools are doing a really nice job of providing some family read nights, some STEM nights. We had the idea of once a quarter each building providing a district-wide parent programming. Bringing in guest speakers, for example, how do I help my students get into college? What do I need to be aware of, and make that a district event to try to get more parents involved. The buildings will continue to hold their own individual parent programming. And the other thing, as our English learners are increasing in this district, we have about 4% of our population are English learners. We want to expand our adult program. Right now it's running at Bremen and Oak Forest, but we have our EL's program, our EL population is growing at Tinley and Hillcrest. We want to expand adult programming to help our parents who are English learners learn English. How do I navigate my community, making sure that they know how to communicate with the schools. And so those are our 3 overarching goals. And so as the buildings develop their Title I plan, their plan will align with these 3 overarching goals, but their task will be building specific. The superintendent has reviewed this plan and is recommending its approval to the board this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Jones, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion?
Just a quick question. When you were talking about you received feedback from teachers, students, parents, and administrators, how was the feedback from like the parents collected?
So so Bremen has their parent caravan, Hillcrest has their parent advisory board. Tinley actually had a parent night back in April, I think it was. And Oak Forest also had a collection of parents come, and they basically, all buildings did the same type of exercise. They looked at school report card, they looked at district report card, and they had a series of questions. It was a free conversation. Basically, what's working with our data? What are some things that we need to improve? What are some activities or tasks do you think we should be doing? And so we gathered all that feedback together from all 4 buildings and analyzed it. Same thing with the students, with the staff. It was looking at data, asking the same types of questions.
Thank you.
What kind of accommodations can we make for parents that are working night? Because we do have a lot of parents that are working at night, they might not be able to make it at night.
Sure.
Consider having something like earlier in the day.
We potentially could. I know Bremen runs their caravan during the day.
Okay.
And I don't know if they designed that specifically because of their
Because they found
population.
that was the situation, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's certainly an option.
Is it possible to video them and
Sure.
put them on the website or something? I don't know.
Especially if they're going to have a guest speaker.
Right.
Sometimes it's more of just a conversation for the school, but if they actually bring in a guest speaker, yeah, that would be.
I just want to say that I'm impressed with the plan, that it really addresses, from something such as getting a kid a pair of glasses to making sure they have their shot. I'm really impressed with this plan, so thank you. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.15 is an overnight field trip request from Tinley Park, the science department. So if you're not aware, we're coming upon a solar eclipse on August 20th. While that doesn't seem unusual because those happen all the time, what's unusual about this one is the way that the trajectory across the United States. Oftentimes you don't have the opportunity to actually see the solar eclipse. So it's going to occur about 1 o'clock-ish in the afternoon on August 20th. And down in Shawnee National Park is supposedly one of the best places in our area to actually see the solar eclipse and the trajectory across the United States. So the Tinley Park science teachers, Mark Rice and Chad Robson, along with Teresa Nolan, would like to take a group of students, and these would be out of the astronomy class, so it's our semester course, down to Shawnee National Park. They would actually go overnight, tour the park, have an opportunity to view the solar eclipse. So the expense is completely on the students, $25. They'll take the little Titan minibus. For them, because they're upperclassmen, they don't lose a day of school because that is freshman day. And so the superintendent has reviewed this request and is recommending the approval of this overnight field trip to the board.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Ms. Russell, second by Ms. Stearns. Go ahead.
How many parents are going? Is there an estimate on parents?
There's only 12 students going,
12
so enough to fit in the minivan, and so it's just the 3 adults.
3 adults.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Dr. Kendall.
Item 8.16 is the 2017-2018 Illinois Association of School Board dues. The annual renewal for the upcoming school year is $10,860, and I'm recommending this for full board approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Jones, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion?
There is an increase because Mr. O'Malley obviously didn't negotiate this, but $170. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Item 8.17 is a resolution honoring the end of the 2016-17 school year. Excuse me.
Whereas it is the mission of Bremen High School District 228 to provide all students with the best possible education, and whereas Bremen High School District 228 Board of Education sets the direction for our schools by envisioning the educational future of our students, and whereas school administrators implement the policies and programs that emanate from the vision of our school community, and whereas teachers take those policies and programs into the classroom to instill a lifelong love of learning in their students, and whereas the support staff provides the day-to-day clerical and human services that enable teachers and administrators to do their jobs, and whereas all of these dedicated professionals seek the best learning environment to the end, that all children will be successful in school and no child will be left behind. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Bremen Community High School District 228 proclaims a successful completion of another school year and thanks our current and retiring staff members for their dedicated service to our children, adopted this 20th day of June 2017. So moved.
Second. Moved by Ms. Gleason, second by Ms. Stearns. Any discussion?
Mrs. Gleason, aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Item 8.18 is personnel. Under leaves, Christina Coppich, Jennifer Swanson, Cassie Gaines, Lisa Giglio-Vicek, and Carissa Fettig. Under resignations, Michael Cicerelli, Thomas O'Malley, and James Donato. Under retirements, Robert Westberg, Linda Griffin, and Nancy Cunningham. Under employment, Ariana Anaya, Michael Sheehan, Geraldine Kaiser, John McGarry, Jesus Vallejo, Sana Anwar, Dominique Potts, Kara Triesenberg, David Schwobel, Robin Vella, Eileen Idaborski, Tommy Henley, Aaron Fisher, Camilla Murray, Rebecca Zavala, Huber Salcedo, Lauren Osling, Joseph Sierra, Joseph Smith, and Rosario Jaramillo. Under change of position, Justin Rivera, Antoinette Miller, and Sade Donald. I'm recommending all of these changes for full board approval.
So moved by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No discussion.
Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to move to closed session to consider information regarding the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees and student discipline. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Jones, second by Mr. Johnson.
Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye. Turn to open session.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Jones, second by Ms. Wrestler.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye.
Item 10 is recommendation for consideration of employment contracts as discussed in closed session. Those contracts are for Lori DeVos, Michael Boniface, Jim Boswell, Scott Buchanan, Wendy Bumpus, Randy Cowenhoven, Dave Curtin, Jim Curtin, Jane Dempsey, Dan Dunn, Jacqueline Frederking, Brian Gibbons, Lisa Giglio-Bisek, Dan Goggins, Lily Holman, Michelle Jurgens, John Caney, Dave Kabelkis, Otis Lane, Sandy Lessentine, Renee Mack, Terry Masterson, Matt Meany, Noreen Miller, Colin Milton, Mike Mongan, Teresa Nolan, April Nakaza, Tom O'Shea, Wendy Popilniak, Brad Sikora, Renee Sims, Jeff Staley, Ed Sterling, Kimberly Temper, Jason Thormeyer, Ron Towner, Adam Wagner, Eric Washington, Corey Williams, Lisa Wunar, and Maurice Young. And in non-union support personnel, Ron Vanovich, Gene Burke, Brian Burke, Patty Carlson, Judy D'Ambrosia, Pat Durkin, Elise Evans, Jennifer Greenway, Sue Herman, Robert Johnston, Janet Kettner, Brittany Kinder, James King, Stephen Clutchart, Christian Lopez, Chris Miller, Marie Prutzman, Jose Roque, Sue Smolinski, Kelly Waiter, and Ryan Wicks. I'm recommending what we discussed in closed session to be adopted by the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Jones, second by Ms. Wrestler.
Mrs. Jones? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stern?
Aye. Our announcements are as follows. Personnel Committee will meet Monday, July 10th, 6:30 at the Ed Center. Finance will meet Monday, July 10th, 7 p.m. at the Ed Center. The next board meeting will be Tuesday, July 18th, 7 p.m. at the Ed Center, at Hillcrest, I'm sorry. I'd like to suggest everyone attend Oak Fest on the 4th, 30th anniversary, big fireworks. And motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.